What if the room you are resting in doesn't belong to you? What if you are merely a transient guest in a space that has already been claimed by someone who refused to leave, even after their heart stopped beating? Welcome back to Ghostly Tales. Tonight, we are bypassing the cheap jump scares. We are ignoring the internet urban legends and the fictional monsters for now. Instead, we are unpacking a horror that is meticulously preserved in ink, ice, and blood. We are stepping inside the shadow of the Rocky Mountains into the hollow hallways of the Stanley Hotel in Estes Park of Colorado. Specifically, we are unlocking the door to the infamous room 217. In late October of 1974, a young, struggling novelist checked into the Stanley's name was Stephen King. He and his wife Tabitha were the absolute, literal only guests in the entire, massive, 140-room colonial building. The hotel was closing for the harsh Colorado winter. The staff was actively packing up linens. The grand dining hall was empty, and the long corridors were stripped of life. Management handed King the skeleton key to room 217. That night, the isolation of the hotel pressed against his mind. But it was what happened inside the room that broke him. Sometime around 2 a.m., King woke up choking on a scream. He had just experienced a nightmare so violently vivid, so absolute in its terror, that his skin was slick with cold sweat. He dreamed of his young son running through those empty, carpeted hallways, screaming in absolute horror as a faceless, animate fire hose chased him down the corridor. King pulled himself out of bed, trembling. He sat at the wooden desk in the pitch darkness of room 217, lit a cigarette, and by the faint glow of the mountain moon, he began writing the framework for what would become The Shining. Most people know that story. It has become a piece of American pop culture lore. But most people do not know the story that happened before Stephen King ever arrived. The real history. The one that made room 217 a crucible of paranormal energy. The documented truth of why, if you book that specific room tonight, you are forcing yourself to share a room with an entity that has been performing the exact same routine for over 115 years. She never left the room she died in, and tonight, we are going to look at the logs that recorded it. To understand the weight of room 217, we have to look at the man who laid its foundations. In the early 1900s, an American inventor named Freeland Oscar Stanley, the co-creator of the famous Stanley Steamer steam-powered automobile, was diagnosed with a severe case of tuberculosis. His doctors gave him a death sentence. They told him he had less than a year to live. In a desperate bid to clear his failing lungs, Stanley traveled to the high-altitude, pristine air of Estes Park of Colorado. The mountains didn't just ease his pain, they cured him. Filled with a profound sense of gratitude and immense wealth, Stanley decided to build a monument in the wilderness. In 1909, he opened the Stanley Hotel. It was a marvel of the Edwardian era. A massive, gleaming white palace of Georgian architecture set against the brutal, jagged backdrop of the Rocky Mountains. It was designed as a playground for the ultra-wealthy. The Astors, the Guggenheims, the titans of American industry would travel by steam train and motor car to spend their summers isolated in absolute luxury. The hotel boasted a grand ballroom, a world-class dining staff, and the marvel of the 20th century. But old buildings carry a specific kind of gravity. When you construct a massive structure in the middle of untouched wilderness, you aren't just building a hotel. You are building a trap for human emotion. Over the first 2 years of operation, the Stanley became a bustling ecosystem of high society drama and hidden class structures. While the wealthy dined downstairs, a small army of housekeepers, cooks, and maintenance workers lived in the shadows of the building, ensuring the illusion of perfection was never broken. And this is where our story shifts. This is not a ghost story built on rumors whispered around campfires. What we are about to discuss lives in the hotel's surviving maintenance logs, in guest registration records, and informal staff testimony collected over a century. The haunting of room 217 is unique because it is bureaucratic, it is recorded, and it begins on a brutally specific date, Tuesday, the 6th of June, 1911. On June 6, 1911, a massive summer storm rolled over the Rockies, battering the wooden frame of the Stanley Hotel. The storm caused a catastrophic failure in the hotel's newly installed electrical system. The lights went dark across the entire complex. To keep the wealthy guests comfortable, management ordered the staff to immediately switch the hotel over to its backup system, open gas lighting. Here's where Elizabeth Wilson enters. Elizabeth was a chambermaid, a young woman known by her supervisors as a meticulous, deeply dedicated worker. She didn't view her job as mere labor. She took an intense, almost religious pride in the care of her assigned rooms. Her primary responsibility that evening was the second floor, specifically the grand bedroom designated as room 217. Elizabeth walked down the darkened hallway, carrying a box of matches. She unlocked the heavy door to 217 and stepped inside. The room was dark, cold, and quiet. What Elizabeth couldn't see, and what she couldn't smell over the scent of the rain outside, was that a massive leak had formed in the main gas pipe feeding the room's light fixtures. For hours, highly volatile gas had been pumping into the enclosed bedroom, filling it from floor to ceiling like an invisible, explosive fluid. Elizabeth pulled a match from the box. She struck it against the abrasive strip. The moment the open spark met the saturated air, room 217 detonated. The blast was catastrophic. It didn't just shatter the windows. The concussive force tore through the structural beams of the building, completely obliterating the floor of room 217. Elizabeth Wilson was caught directly in the epicenter of the eruption. The blast threw her downward, sending her body crashing through the splintered floorboards, plunging through the ceiling of the first floor, and landing violently on the tables of the grand dining room below. It should have killed her instantly. By all accounts of physics and medicine in 1911, she should have been a corpse. But she wasn't. Elizabeth survived the fall. Her body, however, was broken. Both of her ankles were completely shattered, and she suffered severe internal trauma. The hotel paid for her medical treatment, and after months of agonizing, slow recovery in a local clinic, Elizabeth did something that baffled her family. She came back. She didn't sue Freeland Stanley. She didn't flee the mountains. The moment she could walk again, she put her white apron back on, tied her hair up, and went right back to work in the very corridors that had nearly claimed her life. She continued to serve the Stanley Hotel with the exact same rigid, flawless devotion until her retirement decades later. But history records a strange detail about her departure. On her very last night as an employee, before she was to leave the mountains forever, she requested a final favor from management. She wanted to spend one night staying in the hotel, not as a servant, but as a guest. The hotel granted her request, but the old logs do not state which room they gave her on that final night. They didn't need to, because the moment Elizabeth Wilson passed away years later in her sleep, room 217 became a place where the work never stopped. The reports of anomalous activity in room 217 did not begin decades later. They began almost immediately after Elizabeth's retirement and subsequent death. During the 1920s and 1930s, the Stanley Hotel maintained a rigorous guest feedback log. In those days, the language used by high society guests was delicate, filtered through Victorian politeness. Wealthy patrons didn't write about ghosts or monsters. Instead, hotel managers began noticing a bizarre pattern of complaints that used the phrase atmospherically unusual or unwarranted intrusions. Let's look at the actual mechanics of these early complaints. A guest would check into room 217, unpack their leather trunks, and leave their clothes draped over chairs or scattered across the floor, as wealthy travelers often did, expecting the staff to clean up after them, turn off the lights, and go to sleep. When the morning sun broke through the windows, the guests would find their belongings completely transformed. Luggage that had been left wide open was now neatly zipped and buckled. Shoes that had been kicked carelessly into different corners of the room were found sitting side by side at the foot of the bed, perfectly aligned with the grain of the floorboards. Something was in the room, and it was obsessed with order. This is the element that sets the haunting of room 217 completely apart from almost every other documented haunting in other rooms of the Stanley. There is no malice here. There are no bloody messages on the mirrors, no broken plates, no aggressive, deep growls. The entity inhabiting room 217 behaves with absolute precision, like a deeply institutionalized chambermaid who cannot understand that her contract has ended. Elizabeth Wilson was a woman who defined her entire identity by her work, and in death, that loop remained unbroken. If a guest was messy, she cleaned up after them. But if a guest brought something into the room that violated her strict early 20th century moral code, the manifestation changed. Throughout the 1950s and 60s, unmarried couples who checked into room 217 began reporting a significantly more aggressive experience. Dozens of logs detail unmarried men waking up in the middle of the night, feeling an immense freezing cold pressure building between them and their partners. It felt, as one guest wrote in 1964, as though an invisible, rigid wall of ice had forced its way into the center of the bed, physically pushing us apart. Elizabeth was a traditionalist, and in her room, her rules still applied. The account that carries the most weight, the one that truly stays with me, comes from a former head of maintenance at the Stanley Hotel. He worked there for 11 consecutive years before retiring in 2009. He gave an interview to an independent paranormal archivist under the condition of total anonymity. He was asked why the hotel staff seemed so fiercely protective of room 217. He said, "We reached a point where we stopped sending new, younger staff members into 217 alone after dark. Not because they were in danger, not because anything violent was going to happen to them. It was because they would come back downstairs to quiet. Something about the air inside that room unsettles people in a psychological way that takes 3 or 4 days to wear off." When asked what he personally felt when he walked across that threshold, he paused, then replied, "It always felt like I had just interrupted something important. Like she had been standing directly in front of the mirror or by the closet a millisecond before I pushed the door open, and I was just catching the faint, fading tail end of her rushing out of the room." He was asked if that feeling frightened him. He said no. That's the most unnatural part of the whole thing. It never felt threatening. It felt like she was just trying to do her job, and I was getting in her way. He paused, then added one final line that recontextualizes the entire haunting, and that makes it so incredibly strange to sleep in. Because you realize you aren't dealing with a monster. You are dealing with an infinite loop of human duty. The Stanley Hotel still rents room 217. It is one of their most requested rooms. There is almost always a wait list. The current staff, when asked, are careful. They describe reports. They acknowledge the history. They do not dismiss. And they do not, in my reading of their public statements, perform. They speak about Elizabeth Wilson the way people speak about someone they have worked alongside for a very long time. With a kind of quiet familiarity. There is a tradition at the Stanley that I want to tell you about because it's not widely reported and I think it says something. When new housekeeping staff are trained to clean room 217, they are told, informally, from senior staff to junior, to say good morning when they enter. Not as a ritual, not as a ghost hunting technique, just as a courtesy, because, as one long-serving member of housekeeping put it, if she's still in there looking after the guests, the least we can do is acknowledge her. Elizabeth Wilson survived the explosion of 1911. She recovered. She returned. She worked in that hotel for decades more. She was, by all accounts, exceptional at her job. She died of natural causes, off-site, some years after her retirement. And the room she gave so much of her life to caring for has never, in over a century, been fully empty. I don't know what that means. I know what it feels like to consider. I think she is still doing her job. I think she doesn't know she's finished. And I think the most unsettling part of room 217 is not what it contains. It's what it reveals about devotion, about what we keep doing long after anyone could possibly expect us to, long after we even understand that we're doing it. If you ever stay in room 217, and I genuinely mean this, say good morning when you walk in. If you've been inside a place that carried something you couldn't explain, an old building, a room that felt occupied, a space that changed your behavior without your permission, the description below has a place for you to send it. Every account we receive is read. Some of them find their way onto this channel. If you enjoy this episode, please share and leave a like. Also, leave a comment below with your answer to this single question. If you woke at 2 a.m. inside room 217 and felt that mattress compress, would you stay out of reverence for her devotion, or would you run? Your theories are the lifeblood of this channel, and I read every single one. New nightmares are waiting for you every week. Subscribe to Ghostly Tales, click the notification bell, and walk with us into the dark. Because every shadow has a story to tell. Look after yourselves, and sleep well tonight, if you can.